Hello, my name is Janey, and I am going to be telling some stories today. Specifically, because I am still working on my Apollo and Hyacinthus piece, I want to talk about more Apollo love stories, or more accurately, Apollo love tragedies. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in mythology or like a classicist. I am a storyteller, and I have loved, as many people have, Greek mythology, and different offsets of the stories inspired by Greek mythology for a very, very long time. And over the years, I have gathered different versions and sources, and I have kind of combined them on my own to make the most interesting and cohesive story that makes sense to me. So if you hear these stories and you're like, wow, that's not what I heard, it's probably because there's thousands of different sources and you might have heard a different version, and that's totally fine. And if you did, drop it in the comments below. Tell me which version you heard or which version you like best. It's totally valid. But let's get into my version of Apollo and his beef with Eros. Eros being the god of love. Alright, so I like to start this tale off always with the birth of Apollo and Artemis. Leto, their mother, was a goddess who was having an affair with Zeus. This could have been a consensual affair. It's possible. But as we know, it's entirely possible that it was non-consensual. Either way, Leto got pregnant. Every time Zeus had sex, there was a pregnancy. That's just like Greek mythology. It's actually one of the arguments that people use when they talk about how, Zeus was only ever doing anything because he was fated to do so. And one of the arguments is that every time he had sex, be it consensual or non-consensual, a demigod or a new god was born. There was never any blanks being fired from Zeus. However, Leto got pregnant. She assumed she was pregnant with a boy. For whatever reason, she just knew she was having a son. And then Hera found out. And Hera was very, very unkind to Zeus's lovers and also to his illegitimate children. She was absolutely pissed that Leto had done this. And so Hera decided to punish Leto, and as the queen of the gods, she was allowed to do this. She basically told Leto, you are forbidden to deliver your baby anywhere connected to land or to sky. That meant that she wasn't allowed to have her baby on Earth, and she wasn't allowed to have her baby in Olympus. And so Leto wandered everywhere, and eventually she started having those horrible labor pains. But the goddess of childbirth would not come to her because Hera had made a decree. She could not give birth anywhere connected to land or to sky. And so Leto wandered in labor pains for 9 whole days, just in agony, until Poseidon came to her. Poseidon told her, hey Leto, I found a place for you, don't worry. Basically, Poseidon had discovered an island floating in the middle of the sea, and since it was floating, it technically was not attached to land, and it definitely wasn't attached to sky. And so he brought Leto there, and the goddess of childbirth came running. She was like, finally, we found a place for you to deliver this child. Now, of course, Hera tried to delay this. She said, absolutely not. I told her she couldn't have these babies, but the goddess of childbirth managed to get to Leto, and Leto gave birth not to a little boy. She gave birth to a little girl, and she called her Artemis. And Artemis actually sat next to her mom. She was very mature for a newborn infant. And she sat there as Leto began to have childbirth pains again. And to her surprise, she had a second baby, Artemis's twin, Apollo. And some sources say that Artemis actually helped deliver her brother. So she was already in those big sister gender roles way off the bat. So Leto now has these beautiful babies, but she doesn't really have time to revel in her new children, right? She doesn't have time to really enjoy this or even to rest, which thankfully the gods and goddesses don't need the healing time that mortal humans need, but still, she has brand new babies. She wants to enjoy them. But Hera is livid that she was allowed to have these babies at all, because she really thought she had stopped her from this. And so she decided to send a giant python to kill these babies, to terrorize Leto. So Leto had to pick up her newborn children. They clung to her breast and she ran. And she spent the first part of both of her children's life on the run. And everywhere they went, they would seek shelter. People would give them safety for as long as they could. And she tried to make a normal life, but mostly it was just this traumatic childhood where they were always on the run, where they were always in danger, where there was always a giant serpent just beyond, waiting to attack them and kill them. So it's a very traumatic beginning of their lives. And then one day, when they're a little bit older, Zeus visits, Daddy Zeus, and Zeus comes bearing gifts. And he says, for my children, here are some bows and arrows. And they've never seen these before. They've never had their own bows and arrows. Immediately, Artemis is like, great, this is literally all I've been waiting for. Peace. And she skedaddles out. She goes to start like a gang of hot ladies who hunt in the woods and swim naked and punish men who see them naked. She's living the life. She's definitely vibing. Apollo gets this weapon and he thinks to himself, this would be the perfect way to protect my mother who has never had a moment's peace since I was born. This is the perfect thing for her. And so he takes his bow and arrow and he decides to go hunting for the serpent that has been terrorizing them. And he gets there and he has this big battle. He's still very young. He is a new god. He's just proving himself. And eventually, after a really big struggle, he does end up taking this serpent down, this giant serpent that has been sent by the queen of the gods herself. And the story spreads immediately. People are like, this new god, he is so powerful, and he's strong, and he's smart, and he's quick and athletic, and he's so handsome. Did you see how hot he was? And just, he gets showered with attention immediately, and it goes to his head. I'm not gonna lie, he is kind of an asshole. It goes straight to his head and he's thinking, wow, nobody can beat me. I am the best. I'm the strongest. I'm the son of Zeus. Not even his wife can take me down. And he's feeling very full of himself. And as he's walking away from this big battle, feeling very full of himself, he passes a child, a little boy, who is playing with a tiny set of bows and arrows. And he stares at this little boy for a little bit and he decides he's going to start picking on him. Not cool, Apollo. And so he goes up to him and he says, wow, look at your bow and arrow. It's so small. It's so small. You'll never catch anything with that. It's a baby's bow and arrow set for babies. You must be a baby. And as he teases this little boy, the little boy stops and he stares at him for a long time and he really doesn't respond. He's like, all right, well, I guess, cool, man. You're making fun of a literal child. You look great. It looks great on you. And so Apollo continues to absolutely make fun of this child. He's saying, I destroyed a serpent. You will never be able to do anything that I did. And the little boy, again, doesn't really respond. And finally, the Apollo says, and your bows, they can never do any damage. They are weak. And at this point, the little boy's had enough. So this little boy fires an arrow directly into Apollo's heart. And he's feeling his heart. He's shocked. His eyes are wide. And he's thinking, oh, I've been shot. I'm hurt. And then he stops and he looks and he realizes he's actually not hurt. Surprisingly, this little boy fired one of his arrows directly into his chest, and even though Apollo could have sworn he had been hit, there's not a single mark on him. And after that shock subsides, he laughs and he says, you missed. You were shooting me point blank, and somehow you missed. That's how bad of a shot you are. And the little boy said, okay, sure. Well, have a good day then. And he watches Apollo leave. But Apollo has this really weird feeling. Just something is wrong. He suddenly is feeling maybe sick, maybe queasy, but he's looking around. Something is up, and somebody nearby is starting to call to him. And he looks down the hill, and he sees the most beautiful sight he has ever seen. He sees a nymph named Daphne. and Daphne is playing with her sisters, and she's picking flowers, and she is just kind of reveling in her beautiful life. Now Daphne, being a nymph, kind of like a nature spirit, maybe an Oread, a forest spirit, Daphne probably would have been very excited to have a young, strapping god, a new hero, pay attention to her, right? She probably would have been super into this. She looks up and she makes eye contact, and Apollo falls deeply, deeply in love. He doesn't really know where this feeling came from, but he does know this is the biggest, most important feeling he has ever had in his life. It's like he has been shot through the heart with an arrow. And a little boy pops his head over the hill, and he sees Daphne too, and as they make eye contact, the little boy pulls out a second arrow. This isn't the first arrow that he fired at Apollo. This is an arrow of hatred. I think you could have guessed this already, but this is not just a normal little boy. This is Eros, god of love, as a child. And he takes out this arrow of hatred, and he aims right at Daphne, who's minding her own business, who has done nothing wrong to anyone, who has not asked for any of this. And he fires this arrow of hatred directly into her chest. And as Daphne is staring at the beautiful god Apollo, she is suddenly filled with fear and dread and hatred and disgust. She has never felt emotions this intense before. She just knows she has to get away from this god. And unfortunately, Apollo has seen her, and he is so overwhelmed with the feelings that were brought on by the poison, the true and deadly poison of Eros's god of love, that he cannot help himself. He begins to walk down the hill, and as she turns to run, he panics, and he starts to call after her, please wait, don't run from me, please, I just want to talk to you, I have to talk to you, please come here, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, I need to be with you. And as he's running and chasing her and absolutely mad with this love that is just driving him crazy, Daphne begins to run faster, and now she's screaming and she's crying and she's begging him, leave me alone, and he is overwhelmed with these emotions. And again, this arrow of love, this is a poison, and it is absolutely deadly. And so Apollo is also crying and chasing after her and saying, please, I have to see you, I have to talk to you, I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to talk to you. And Daphne realizes she's not going to get away from this god. He's going to catch her, and she's terrified. And so she calls out to her father, who's a river god, and she yells, Dad, please help me. Dad, please, you can help me. You can make this go away. I need help. I don't want this. This god is going to catch me. And her dad hears this and says, oh, did you say you want me to help you or kill you? And she says, Dad, I said help. And he's like, kill? Okay, I'll kill you. And she's like, Dad, no. And the river god decides to help Daphne by turning her into a laurel tree. Now, this is not a reversible spell. It's not like she can just turn back as soon as Apollo gets bored with her. She's a laurel tree for life. She literally just lost her life. She will never be a nymph again. She'll never play. She will never play with her sisters or pick the flowers. She'll never do any of the things she loves again. Partly because her father doesn't know how to just give somebody a stern talking to, but also because Eros decided that his need to punish Apollo for making fun of him and hurting his feelings was greater than the life of a nymph named Daphne. And meanwhile, Apollo has stopped running. The poison is still coursing through his veins, pumping through his heart. And instead of holding this woman who he has, for reasons he cannot explain yet, fallen deeply in love with, he is holding the leaves of this laurel tree, and he knows that there's no bringing her back. And he feels heartbreak for the first time in his life. And so, Apollo gathers up the laurel tree, some of the branches, and he puts one of the sprigs behind his ear, and this becomes one of the symbols of Apollo. And it's a reminder. It's a reminder of what he lost and what he couldn't explain. So this is really the first and biggest loss that he has ever experienced after this very tumultuous childhood, right? On the day that he just had this huge, big victory, this is what happened to him. And you could say that the moral of this story, perhaps, is that you shouldn't bully. It's a good moral. Don't be a bully. You could say the moral maybe is that you can't fight love. But to me, the biggest takeaway I get from this story is that Eros, the god of love, was given the nuclear codes. He has the most dangerous weapon in the entire Greek pantheon. He is the god that people should have been fearing because he can make people lose their minds, do terrible things that they probably would not have done otherwise. He can change your life for better or for worse. And he can take away your choice and your free will. And he definitely is too petty, we have learned, to have been given these nuclear launch codes. Too emotional. And that's the story of Daphne and Apollo. Now, if you haven't watched it already, you can go ahead and check out my story about Apollo and Hyacinthus, which is what this carving is. What I am carving, I'm carving Apollo and Hyacinthus in a peaceful moment before their tragic end. Because again, if there's one thing we know about Greek mythology, Apollo is not allowed to be happy. And now we kind of get why. We get why love was so unkind to Apollo and to his lovers. So if you want to see that video, go ahead and go back a little bit. I have already made a carving video for that. And if you have any suggestions or requests for stories you would like to hear, then please let me know. Right now I have 2 different types of stories up here. I have ones that I read, and usually those are Brothers Grimm stories, ones that are in the public domain, and of course I also have stories that I just tell while I carve. So this is completely live as I do this. And it kind of gives the same feelings as my live cards on TikTok. I would love to do live storytellings here on YouTube. If you liked this and you're like, I want more of this, I go live every Monday on TikTok and I tell stories and mythology and I answer questions in exactly this fashion. So if that's something that you're interested in, go follow me on TikTok. The links are all below. However, I would like to do it here on YouTube because YouTube will download those lives automatically for me onto my channel. So if that's something you're interested in, subscribe. When I get to 1,000 subscribers, I can go live, and I will do that every week as a bonus storytelling night. And of course, go down below to follow my other socials, my Etsy, if you want to buy prints. Eventually this one will be on there, but we have lots of other Greek mythology content up there. And just like and comment and let me know what you think. Have you read Lore Olympus? Do you think of Apollo as a villain? Did this story change a little bit how you think of him outside of the Lore Olympus retelling? Because I personally love Lore Olympus. I really do. I think it's one of the best storytelling webcomics I've ever read. I adore every minute of it, and I love to hate Apollo there. But in my own personal versions of Apollo, I never think of him as the villain anymore. He's definitely done some villainous things, but I'm able to separate some of those myths from my personal story of Apollo. In my mind, though, today, 2022, Apollo does make a really good villain. People think of him as basically a rich white frat boy. And that's a really good villain to have if you're trying to tell a certain story. For example, a story of Persephone. However, as is true in Greek mythology, the best thing about it is that nothing is ever as it seems, and there's always a version to support a different point of view. I think that's why so many people love it. And why it always promotes so much arguments. Next week on my TikTok channel, I'll have a lot of videos dedicated to Medusa. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, including the other versions of Medusa that you might not have heard of, then definitely go follow me on TikTok and we can learn some stuff together. All right, y'all. I hope you have a really lovely day. I'm gonna spend about 5 minutes just carving silently. And then I'm gonna head out and I'll see you on